Hey everybody, it's Gary Woodbury. We're back with Talk of the Town. We're going to be talking about where your tax dollars are spent, where the money comes from, and hopefully you'll stay tuned. Stick with us. Good evening. Thank you for hanging in there. Welcome once again to the Talk of the Town. I'm real excited about being back. A couple of announcements. We'll be seen on channel 192 and 194. Unfortunately, the call-in isn't working tonight, so we are live on Facebook. So if you have anything you want to talk about, you can write your comments. We'll get them in, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. Tonight, it's real important to talk about how do we spend your tax dollars, because I'm all over Facebook just like everybody else. So we're going to break down where we put your money, where your money comes from, and where it gets spent within the town. A little different than my business. I am a for-profit business, and what I look at is what's my return on my investment, and hopefully there's a small increase of what you spend. Different on the town side. The town side is nothing more than a service company. We're for a nonprofit service company. We provide services and not generate a profit. So hopefully you get the gist of the two of those. There is a difference. So I'm going to start off, and I kind of feel like it's kind of show and tell. So I'm going to hold this up, and it says, where do your tax dollars go? Well, 51% of it goes to education. So 54.4% is spent to education. 8.27% goes to public works. 5.55% is administrative and finance. Just a little under 2% is for the transfer station. 15% for public safety. 1.94%, or almost 2%, goes into the library. 11% is for insurance and benefits. 1% is for Otis. 1.6% for health and human services, and 0.04% is for recreation and culture. So what does it mean? It kind of means this. It says, where do your dollars come from? So we're going to show you that. So the money that the town takes in comes from a bunch of different sources. Obviously, 73% comes from your property taxes. 13.31% comes from state aid. 7.21% is your excise tax, and I always hear on Facebook is, I pay excise tax. That's a percentage of your budget that comes in. Almost 2% comes from fees, permits, and licenses. We get a return on the transfer station of about 1.8%. That's collecting the fees for the bags and for the stickers. 1.61% is intergovernmental, meaning that it gets returned. It comes from different funds. 0.15% is in miscellaneous. 0.61 is reserve funds. We get 0.20 comes from fines, and 0.58 is from a betterment fund. So that's kind of the breakdown of where it comes from. So what does it mean, and how do we spend it? And hopefully we'll be able to answer that tonight. It's a little difficult, but every year we publish what they say is the annual town warrant. Any of this stuff is in here. It is public information. It's nothing secretive about it. And if you get the opportunity, you should get it, because I always say at a special meeting, when it comes to the fall town meeting, it only takes 50 people to spend your money. And the annual town meeting, it takes 100. And we have a hard time getting people to show up for that, and that's a disappointment. So when I look at the demographics of Spencer based on, and this is right from the state, this is based on the 2010 census. So when we look at it, what's the makeup of our town? So when you break it down by the numbers here, it's pretty amazing when you look at it. So from the state, they break it down by children, age groups. 0 to 4 is 625, and these are kids. Ages 5 to 9, it's 665. Ages 10 to 14 is 771, and ages 15 through 17 is 414. for a total population on children alone from 0 to 17 is 2,475. So roughly not quite a third of our population, because we know we had a slight decline in population. Then I looked at the seniors, came out of the same one. What's the makeup of them? Because I always hear, seniors can't afford an increase on taxes, and it's amazing that I fall into that group. So the senior population as of 2010 was 3,002. Out of 3,002, the anticipation based on the numbers out of here, based on a 10-year projection, and the 10-year projection is, and I'll go back to it because they do project it out to 2035, but if we look at just 10 years from the last survey, total children in town, they figure will be about 2,060. And when I look at the total of seniors, where's our town going, that changes drastically in itself. It is that the anticipation on that is it will be about 3,800 roughly. So you can see where the town's going is the older population seems to stay, the younger population is not growing, it's decreasing. So it makes it hard for us to try to figure out what the money coming into the town is going to be, let alone that the money we get from the state is decreased. And then I looked at historically, and I happen to get this from the school department, is where we were in October of 2016. In October 2016, the enrollment at the schools were 1,469. And if I go to October 1st of 2017, it's projected it was 1,369. So we have a declining population of the younger group. We have an increase in the older group, and that leaves the middle of the road for the ones that are left that really have to carry it. So to me, we have to find new ways. We have to try to understand where your money is spent. So by doing that, I'm going to break this down a little bit easier, and hopefully you'll understand it is in this book, is it will break down every department. It will break down what the budgets are. It will tell you where your money's being spent, including what we spend on education. So based on roughly the numbers I gave you, we're talking somewhere around $18 million to $20 million range. And part of that number is the sewer and water department, which are enterprise funds, meaning it's a user-payer system. So based on that, it kind of didn't really get into that because that falls on a very small percentage that fills that void. So when I look at it, I take the select board, and I'm going to break this down by departments. And you'll see how this money starts adding up, and it adds up pretty quickly. And that being said, is for the select board, if everybody who follows politics know that we as a select board, and I'm only 1/5 of that board, we collect zero in salary. We don't get a dime for doing this. I sometimes laugh. I tell everybody I do it for the money, but we really don't take a salary. We do have an expense account that's about $4,200. That's for incidentals, which we may have to need. Sometimes we don't even use it. So when we start with the selectmen, the next logical move is to look at the town administrator in that office and what it takes to operate. So broken down, the town administrator's office, in salary, it's $161,354, and there's $8,300 in expenses, and roughly that number comes out to $169,654. So then we look at the Finance Committee, which is in charge of trying to make sure that we're spending your money in the right places, and we try to get their approval, and hopefully we get it every time we go for it. They have a salary account of $200, an expense account of $1,000 for $1,200. Again, volunteers taking the time out of their life to do the right thing and help the town. The town accountant department, which is a real important function to us. That's the checks and balances. It's to make sure that everything is in place. The salary in that account is $61,026. Expenses are $26,150 for a total. The accountant department is $87,176. And some of these are really going to get big based on the size, based on what they do for the town. So as I go along, please understand these are going to jump around. So the Board of Assessors, which sets your property value, do reevaluations. They also make sure that if there's any veterans qualify for tax exemption on some stuff, we have a senior work-off program that allows people to work and get a break on their taxes. So they control and make sure that that's in line. So the Board of Assessors, their salary and wages is $107,768. Their expenses is $27,000. And their total budget in that department is $134,798. And I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers, but everybody says, where's my money going? Well, this is where it goes. And I'll gladly answer if you got any questions about any one of these in particular. But so when you go to the Treasurer Collector's office, that's who takes in your taxes. That's who makes sure that we have what we have in the bank and where our investments are. So the Treasurer Collector's office salaries are salary and wages, because some are salary and some are paid hourly, is $128,736. Their expense account is $26,685 for a total of $155,421. Information technology, and you heard me talk about Facebook and everything. Well, we have to pay to make sure that we have our internet is up, that our technology is up to date, the computers, and everything that falls into that category, and that we spend about $104,000 a year on. Tax title, tax taking of land, and we carry in there $25,000 as an expense. Town clerk. Town clerk takes care of marriages, licenses, has to be up to speed with the laws when it comes to voting. And again, that department with salaries, because some are salary and some are hourly, is $98,736 in wages, and that expenses are $25,433. Excuse me. That department is $124,169. Election and registrars. When you go to the polls, we have to have people to check, know where you're at. That account in wages and salaries is $22,322. We have an expense account in there of $19,220 for a total of $41,542. Town hall maintenance. We put $69,000 a year in there to maintain the town hall. I think it's light, and I'll get into that as we go along. Public safety takes into account what falls under public safety is going to be the police, fire and emergency services. It's not just the fire department by itself. There's a lot more to it. Police department in salary and wages is $1,850,958. We have an expense account over there of $178,852. In police department, we spend a little over $2 million. Fire emergency service, salary, wages, and keep in mind this year we have a grant for 4 firefighters. That's a good thing for this town, I hope. And salary and wages spent in fire services is $232,000. That's salary because some people are under contract. $232,643. Expenses are $420,873 for $653,516. Excuse me. Otis, which is your building department. Building permits, takes into account any permitting you might need, takes in the planner. It's everything that's down there. So Otis salary and wages are $190,932. Expenses are $20,659 for $211,519. As you know, we just did the street lights in town. In that account, we carry $5,000 for street lights, for traffic lights rather. Then we get into utilities and facilities, which takes in the highway, water, sewer. That's controlled by Mr. Tyler. So salary and wages for utility and facilities is $77,569. Expenses of $41,421. So utilities and facilities has a budget of $118,990. The highway in salary and wages is $500,589. Expenses are $387,224. That department is budgeted at $887,813. Snow and ice account. What we try to do is when we have a bad winter, that's the one department we can deficit spend, meaning if we don't have enough money in that account, we can influx it at a town meeting. And we can spend that account even though the money isn't there and backload it. So we normally figure in overtime out of that account. We build in about $50,000, and we build in $150,000 that takes into account going and buy road salt and sand and whatever we need. We put $200,000 in there. Most of the time we overspend that, but it's kind of a safe cushion. Streetlights, because we don't, we sub out the streetlights to Paxton Light. We pay them $90,750 to take care of those. The transfer station, and I'm almost done, honest to God. Transfer station salary and wages is $77,394. The expenses down there are $255,000. That's right, $255,150 for a total of $332,544. Okay, tree warden. Tree warden's salary is $78,888. Expenses of $14,200, and that's to take care of any trees that come down, any trees that need to be taken down, and make sure that any trees, when we're doing the road projects, they get to be taken down in the right fashion. You just can't go clear cut. That number is $22,088. We spend approximately in what we budget, and it's pretty good, pretty sound, for gas, diesel. We have in that budget $110,000 that takes care of that. We get into Health and Human Services, which takes in the Board of Health, the Board of Health agent, his expenses, and what it takes to run that. Salaries are $64,582, expenses of $7,930. Board of Health department runs on $72,512. COA, Council on Aging. We have a salary of, that's actually wages, of $23,400, expenses of $32,800. That department runs on $56,200. Veterans agent, wages of $15,444. We know that's a part-time position. Expenses are $176,900. That department runs on $192,344. In that department, because it takes care of the veterans coming back from war, and we all know we're in conflicts all over the world, and the servicemen coming back who needs the help contacts the veterans agent, and that has increased drastically over the last, last 8 years anyways. The library salary and wages are $202,679. We spend $57,100 on books and subscriptions. We have an expense to operate that at $97,115, and that library total budget with salaries and everything is $356,894. Parks and Recs. Everybody knows that, we took a beating, we closed some parks, and their expenses, and we only built in expenses, and I'm going from 2017 budget, was $7,500, and that's to try to maintain the parks they have. Historical Society, $500 is in their budget, and then we put aside $1,500 for the Veterans Parade. So on top of that, when you look at us as, and again, we're not really a business, we're a service company, we spend $1,770,618 in benefits. That's your health insurance, it's any of the liabilities we have at that point. On top of that, We have to insure our property, we insure our vehicles. And general liability and insurance for this town is $234,790. So if you add these up, and I know you couldn't do it as fast as I was going, but roughly on the town we spend to operate as a service business, $8,732,513. That's what the town spends. As you can see, the numbers are all over the place. And there's some that really sticks out is what population is growing and what do we have to invest in, where do we go from here, and how do we do it. Education, we spend $9,431,297, and I don't want to cloud this and think that it all goes to Prouty, because it doesn't. We pay Tantasco, we have Smith Vocational, so there's a lot taken into that, but the bulk of our budget at over 51% falls back and it goes into that category. So differences from the town's perspective, anything that affects us affects services. So if everybody knows what really happened back in 2007, 2008, very tough times for everybody. Tough times being myself. I had a business then. It's the first time in my lifetime that the economy, when it tanked, it virtually took down the automobile industry, which I was a part of, and it also took down the housing market. It's the first time I can ever remember that both fell at once, and that's why this was so devastating to everybody. There was no breathing room. It wasn't like the building trade was still going to go, and the car industry went down, or vice versa, and that really hurt everybody. So as we try to build back from that, we had an opportunity last year. We had about roughly $80,000 we could spend to try to bring something back. For me, it was a tough choice because I'm all about, we have the same amount of policemen we had when the new police department came in. We have the same amount of highway workers, and we have 131 miles of road that we take care of. So it's not like it's a small task. So those were the things that I concentrated on, and I thought they were the most important. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough money to do it all. So we broke it down to picking a few small things that we could do, and that got approved, but it wasn't a lot of money to spend. This year, we were fortunate. There's a lot going on out there. That housing market came back a little bit. Property was reevaluated. Abbey Solar Farm came online. That's just a few. So our new growth, what we call new growth, which is sustainable, was about 543,000. That's a milestone for this town. We did a couple other things too. Is back when we put in a meals tax that comes back to the town. That brings in about 100,000 or better a year. You don't notice it. And it's not like you're paying it all yourself. People who come into town, eat in our restaurants, they pay a percentage of that. So that was an increase that we get, not on the backs of the taxpayer, but it was spread across the board. So that's kind of where your money comes from. So when you look at where the new growth is, it's what we call sustainable, is what can you do with that money? What do you bring back? Doesn't change our priorities. And if you watch the selectmen's meeting, you'll see where I say that a lot. I say, is how can something be a priority last year as your number one and number two, and now we're picking stuff that wasn't even at the top. But again, as we have a 5-member board, and that's a good thing. It's good that we have different opinions on the board so that we're not all stuck trying to get our own way. We have to talk about it. So that's some of the stuff that happened that I'm excited about. So that's our new growth. That's really important to us. We also had about 600,000 that came in from state. That's a big increase. That free cash amount is something that you don't want to use. And the free cash of 600,000, it's kind of a one-time thing. You never can count on it. So we try to buy capital things with that, and we try not to build it into the budget. Earlier, I said Chief Parsons got a grant for 4 firefighters. That's going to cost, once the grant's over, it's a 75-25 split for the first 2 years, and then it reverts to 25-75, town being on the hook for the 75%. So out of our new growth, that's going to tie up about $300,000. So we have to be very careful and very frugal with what we do. Doesn't mean that we don't try to do something, but you have to plan on that. So that's kind of where your tax dollars are. If there's any questions, please, jump on Facebook, send the question in, we'll try to answer them. But I think it's important when you look at where all this money goes, you can see some departments probably need an influx, some don't. But as I look at this and I say to myself, how can we make it better? So I'm going to touch on a point because I talk about social media. And I hear a lot, because my kids are in their 40s, so when I look at that and I watch some of their friends say, well, I remember when the town was. I remember when this was there. If you go back as far as I do in the town, my grandmother lived on Highland Street. There was a market in the tenement house at the bottom of Star Street. I remember the IGA being in Macklin's building. I remember Clevin Shoe being where Price Chopper is. I remember the Broom Factory. It's this type of stuff that we all remember it. The difference is change happens. And when that change happens, you can't control it. If we didn't want change and we didn't want to move forward, Flexcon would still be on Wall Street. We wouldn't have a major employer in this town. And the fair would still be here. And you wouldn't have that plaza with the big Y. And sometimes competition is good. Sometimes change is good. But when we talk about history and the stuff we enjoyed when we were kids, Champ Theater used to be on Mechanic Street, and that burnt down. Massasoit Hotel was a beautiful mainstay for Main Street, and it burnt down. So when things like that happen, it's not like everybody rushes in and rebuilds. So we lose that faction of this town. Doesn't mean historically we don't remember it. Hopefully we record it and we have it for future generations. But the new generation coming up are going to remember the stuff that they had. And we talk about Luther Hill Park, and we talk about O'Gara Park. We talk about the Spencer Fair, and that Spencer Fair is different than when I grew up and we used to go. You used to have the cow barns that burnt down. So every town goes through changes. It's how we build back from those changes. Building back means that we make a difference. So how do we make that difference? Well, we look at what we're doing now. We look at where we want to be in the future. I look at what do I leave behind when I'm out of office, and hopefully the next generation comes up through, and they realize that they're a part of this community. We go through every time looking for people to step up, and it's hard. Most families, it's the husband and wife are working, they're paying for daycare. So when I talk about the population of the kids in this town, and I talk about the senior population, and where it's going to go, you have a decline in the one category and an increase in the other, and how are we going to take care of it? It's only one situation. And as we grow through this as a town, you have to be able to build on it, and you've got to come up with better ways of doing things and thinking of different ways that are different for us. And I bet you at home right now, barring a few, because one of the other things I always hear about is the ladder truck. We didn't need a ladder truck that big. We didn't need, but I can guarantee you there's very few people at home that know we have a new fire truck. You know why you don't know? Because we didn't come to you and ask for a debt exclusion. And nobody would know that we had a frame problem with the one we replaced. So if you look at engine 2, which is, I think it was 2 years ago we did it, we had to come up with a better way of doing it. And it wasn't to go to the people and say, listen, we need to get a debt exclusion. We need another fire truck. We knew that the ladder truck would come off this year. We could have done that because the value of the ladder truck versus what we're buying engine 2 for was a completely different truck, different use. But we didn't come to you because they had a program out there. Because I've been in the automobile business for a long time, I approached the town administrator and I said, the best value we're going to get or the best bang for our dollar is to lease this truck. So we'll lease this for 4 years, no burden on the town. We build it into a budget. It means we couldn't do something else, but it gives us the opportunity to build that department up, not have to come to the voters, and have a new fire truck. And nobody knows that. So that's some of the stuff, and that's thinking out of the box and making it different and making it easier on the public so that we don't have to keep coming back to you. So to do that, and I want to bring this up because we as a town need to know what your thoughts are. So the Finance Committee, and I'm going to read this, but the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen have created an important survey. This survey is going to seek input from the residents, including, and this is important, children, young adults. It's open to any Spencer residents from age 6 on up. I don't care if you're 100. Spencer business owners, which I happen to be, property owners, town employees, any individual can respond separately. It doesn't matter. You're not limited to one response per household. All we want to do is we want to identify any assets that you feel are important or that we have, explore them, and share our hopes and determine measurable results that will help us achieve our desired future as a town. You can take the survey a couple of different ways. You can go to spencermass.gov and select boards. Then you click Finance Committee, and it will link you to the survey. And it takes you a little bit, but it does work. If you prefer, we also made paper copies, and those can be found. We gave them out at the town meeting in the fall, and we have them at the town hall. They're available at the library. They're available at the senior center, and they were all out there after November 6th. So this is important. This gives you a chance, instead of just throwing what you feel out there and seeing the reaction, to really voice your opinion, because it is important. And I always said this before when I had the show, is the difference between Spencer, the town. Where do you live? I live in Spencer. Oh, really? Yeah. Difference between that knowledge or where do you live? I live in Spencer. What a great community. The only thing that makes a difference of whether Spencer's a town or a community is you, the people. It's not me as a selectman. It's not me as a business owner. It's trying to get involved. I've been a selectman for about 8 years now. Prior to that, I was on the Disability Commission. So I've been involved in stuff for probably 14, 16 years. And not because I'm special, because if I sit at home and I complain, then I'm not really doing anything about it. But by getting involved and trying to make a change, that's the difference. So I know it's hard for everybody, but please, when you're on this site doing the survey, take a look at what's available in all the openings we have on different committees. It's important. It's important for you if you want to have a say in your town government. It's more important to do that than to be on social media saying, geez, I'm not happy the town made a decision that, is they got to worry about tearing down the Sugden block. We made that decision based on the town side. Is it feasible for the town to operate that building and lose $40,000, $50,000 a year? No. Does it mean we're giving up on that and we're not going to try to find a buyer for it? We're not going to try to do something to keep that building going? We are. I chair what we call the Building Reuse Committee. It's one we started when we said, geez, we have Pleasant Street School that's falling down. What are we going to do with it? We have Cherry Street Fire Station. What are we going to do with it? We have Lake Street School. Oh my God, what are we going to do with it? So we're trying to find what's the best solution to take this property we have that's virtually of little or no value, and I'm not saying that overall, but that's the way we have to look at it. Are we the best owners for that property? Can we maintain it? And I'll get into some of that stuff. So that's the way we look at it. Doesn't mean we're giving up on the tenants, we're not giving up on the building. It just means we're probably not the best owner for it. For us, because we pay prevailing wage, the estimates were about $6 million to renovate that. private citizen, private company who isn't hooked under the same laws that we are, could they get it done? And I used to say, even if it was half the price, we couldn't afford to do it. But let's say a private entity who could do it and ends up investing $1 million, $1.5 million, can he get a return on it? He might be able to. I don't know that. I'm not going to tell you is anyone who looks at it is looking for a return on investment. Same as my business. If I buy a car, I'm looking for what's my return on my investment. It may not be large, you know, but I invest money to make money. And it's a struggle. So that's the way we look at it when we look at these buildings. How do we fund it? How do we find the money? I said this before, and hopefully everybody knows, is when we were doing over the town hall renovations, that number when it originally started, because we tend to kick the can down the road. Just a fact of life, that's the way we are. And, oh, we can't ask for this, we can't do this. So we got to find different ways to do it. So the town hall was about $500,000 when we first started looking at what it would cost to renovate it. By the time we did it, it was $1.2 million, and we couldn't do everything. Now I'm worried about how do we maintain that. Tony Bove, when he was a selectman, his big thought was we should build a building maintenance account, meaning if something happened, we weren't in dire straits. We could maintain our buildings instead of waiting until it's either too late or it becomes, we got to put out the fire. It's not a way to run. So that's some of the stuff we're looking at as a board. How do we do that? How do we build it in? And where do we find it? Again, I talk about sustainable income. That's what we're looking for. So those are some of the things. So when I worry about the town hall, every year we do what they call, and I call this the want list. It's a capital improvement, capital program request. And it's quite extensive. I know you can't see it or read it at home, but these are 2 years' worth. So when I look at this, I look at, and we're going to go back to 2016 just to pick out and try to drive home a point of what happens when you kick the can down the road is salt storage shed. We talked about snow and ice. A salt storage shed is where we store salt for the wintertime. It falls in our watershed, and at some point we're going to be forced to do something. Clean Waters Act, everything that's involved. So back in 2016, the estimate to do a new building, it was $450,000. Our request now took that, and now the salt storage shed request, $600,000. So in a matter of almost 2 years, because we run a fiscal year, that's jumped up to that amount that $150,000 is short term. So that has to become a priority. How do we pay for it? I'm not sure, and we'll figure a way, I hope. But we decided to start putting money away now and try to build up to that. So when I look at everything that's on here, and it's a wish list, and I look at what happened, where do we get the extra money, and just some of them is landfill. We needed to repair the cap back then. That got approved. You guys approved it at a town meeting, $80,000. Remove the oil tanks, which we had to remove by law. You have a year to remove the oil tanks in the ground if you convert and stop using them. So we did the town hall. We did Maple Street School, which is now the Senior Center Community Center. We did a radio console, which was for the emergency radio for the police fire. We did the rail trail, and we did the roof at the highway to try to protect our interest there. So that's what we ended up doing, and it's very, compared to what was requested, which was a total of roughly, we didn't fund about $188,000 of what we needed. So this year, that number is going to be stronger, and hopefully we'll have a way to do it. So not to bore everybody on the numbers, but I just kind of get frustrated when I hear I pay my taxes, It takes roughly $12,000 to educate one child in the school system. And I can tell you, is my taxes aren't $12,000 a year. So somehow that money comes in, and the state formula doesn't work anymore. So it's very important that our state reps, our state senators keep plugging away at this like they have been to come up with a better formula on Chapter 70. Because right now is school systems are dying, and they're in need. In need because of the fact that they're not funded like they were. So that becomes important. Education is important to the kids. Taking care of employees is important. So when I get to that, I met with the town administrator. Adam did this before, and this has been going on for quite a long time. We had a grant to do a survey, and that survey is how do you retain employees in the service business, meaning we provide services at a no profit, and how do we retain our employees? So we did a report, it's being done by the Collins Center out of UMass Boston, and it's going to compare us to other towns. It's going to compare jobs that we do. And it doesn't mean that we're, I'm sure it's some jobs we're not paying enough, some where we are. I don't really know where it's going to come from. Hopefully we're going to have that report back. But like anybody, whether you're private sector or whether you're in the municipality sector, it's how do you retain your employees? So to retain your employees, you got to make the working conditions so that they're fair and equitable, just like in the business world. And hopefully you do that by saying, is looking at job descriptions. I have a background in methods engineering, time study, and efficiencies. And when I look at that, I say, okay, how do we retain our employees? How do we not train them to have them move on to a bigger community, better paying jobs? And are we competitive? That's the business world. It's no different than Adam leaving the town of Spencer is it's okay to better yourself. So are we doing the right thing? Are we retaining them? Are we making sure, and when I say that, I don't mean that it's walk through and say, geez, I'm real happy you're here. It's do we provide a service? Are we competitive in that service industry? And are we doing the right thing? So hopefully that Collins report is going to give us that. That's due in. I'm looking forward to that. I think that's very important. And again, historically in this town, I miss a lot of the stuff that everybody's talking to on Facebook. Unfortunately, that's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change. Part of the reason I'm doing this show again is because my goal is every month when we do this, and it will be the first Monday, is to have a co-host or a guest. And that can be you from anywhere out there that's watching. And if you have something to discuss, you want to bring it in, we're going to be open. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to, actually, I really don't want you to. I want to hear your side of it because maybe the perception out there is not reality. So I said tonight I was going to make an announcement. So I talk about how do we get better? How do we think outside of the box? One of the things I told you at home is not many people know, unless you're involved in the fire department or really into town government, realize that there's a new fire truck that we didn't come after you for a debt exclusion. We didn't ask for it. There was no need. We're thinking different avenues on how do we give a service? How do we take care of? And if I had my way, we should be able to collect from the insurance company if there's a fire and get paid for what these guys have to do to save it. But that will never happen. I don't think it will ever happen. So that's some of the stuff that makes it interesting for me to try to find a way around this. So the last thing, and I said I was going to make an announcement tonight, as I looked at where the town of Spencer was, and knowing that the hard times everybody went through and we're trying to rebuild, and this is not gloom and doom. We are on the way up. Hopefully we don't spend money like drunken sailors. We think things out. We make sure that, that they're sustainable. By that I mean is to make sure that if we make an investment in something, we can protect it, we can take care of it, and not have to keep coming back to the well and saying, geez, I made a mistake. Instead of 40, I really needed 100. Because that's the stuff that makes people wonder, are you really doing the right thing, or are you doing things just because it's a feel-good thing? So a little over 4 years ago, I was trying to figure a way how this town could become, how could we get sustainable income coming in? At that point, I was reading a lot of stuff from DEP, what the DEP wanted to be put on landfills. Landfills, as you know, is non-buildable. So here we are 4.5 years later. We developed a committee called the Solar Landfill Committee. We took a piece of land that's on your transfer station that you can't build on. And after that process, we finally made a decision a week ago. That decision is to, and I don't know if you can see this, but that decision is to put a solar farm on our transfer station. What that means is this company, and we did pick the company, will actually build it. They'll actually maintain the landfill cap. They'll actually take care of that property for us. And it means we'll enter into a lease with them. So you heard the numbers, and we were talking about new growth, and I talked about the Abbey coming online. I talked about where we were. So what does that mean? It means this. I took an idea 4.5 years ago. I brought it to the point we are now. At the next selectmen meeting, my committee will be coming before the selectmen, asking them to accept the choice we made. And that influx, what I said is when I leave here, it's to leave a legacy. That legacy is going to be, we'll be bringing in just leasing the land. It doesn't include the taxes on the equipment. That's going to bring in somewhere around $350,000 a year for the next 20 years, to the tune of $6,487,000. So roughly $6,500,000 is going to start coming into this town. And again, it's not going to the taxpayers. It's thinking outside of the box, how can I make it better? So that's one thing we're doing, and I hope to look at other avenues where we can bring in more income. I think when everybody sees these numbers as they're projected out, there'll be a lot more people on board, and hopefully we can carry it on. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm sorry I kind of tied it up with a lot of numbers, but please, if you have any questions, you couldn't get through, and I apologize for the phone not being there. My cell phone is 774-200-0251. I'd gladly go over any of these numbers so you know where your money's being spent. Thank you, everybody. Good night. I'll see you next month.